Hi, and welcome to the latest edition of the Tech Guys Midnight Court here at the palatial but not ostentatious, to steal a line from my old partner, Joe Mangiacotti from the old Conservatively Speaking show, uh, studios, otherwise known as the Tech Guys Room. And I am delighted to spend about a half hour talking about the various things going on. And I got to say, first of all, I'm going to take off the glasses, even though I can't see as well without my reading glasses. And I'm doing this for Barbara Espinoza, who was looking at my old podcast and said, "How come you got those blue glasses on?" And it's actually not that the glasses are blue, it's that the reflection of the screen, because I'm using the webcam in my laptop. When you put the glasses on, the screen at least with these glasses, the screen reflected blue. So I'm going to switch to these glasses. Hopefully, hopefully that'll cut down on that glare that was annoying Barbara so much. And I got to tell you, this is going to be a hard episode of the Midnight Court. And the reason why this is going to be such a hard episode is I've got so much to talk about and not a lot of time to do it, partially because I'm going to need to sleep sooner or later, and partially because I have an appointment in exactly, 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes from my baseball league, the tabletop baseball league that I run. And may I recommend it to anyone who's interested in baseball? Dynasty Baseball Online, great game. They're running a special right now. I'll tell you more about it on Monday's show, but definitely something you want to check out. You can get you can get a free 2-day trial, and they'll give you extra time. I'm with the special that they're running. I've got that on an email over there, but we don't want to get too deep into that because I want to talk about. Remember, we talked about conventional wisdom last time around, and our last podcast was the day before the primary, the Super Tuesday primary, and what a difference a few days makes. When I was last broadcasting, Super Tuesday had not taken place. We did not have. Bernie Sanders was expected to win Massachusetts. He was expected to win Maine. He was expected to win Minnesota. And all of a sudden, this cascade took place. And Joe Biden, apparently biding his time until this moment, has surged forward. And we saw Mayor Pete drop out. We saw Klobuchar drop out before the primaries to help Joe out. And then we saw Bloomberg drop out, and I must admit, Bloomberg's dropping out surprised me a little bit. And then Warren dropping out, which surprised me a little bit more. And let me explain why those two things surprised me. Bloomberg dropping out surprised me because if it got to a brokered convention, Bloomberg would be in very good shape, because Bloomberg has a lot of money. And one thing about having a lot of money in a room full of politicians and consultants is they all want some. And because they all want a share of that money, they do not want to upset my Bloomberg. So if my Bloomberg decided to hang around, if there was a brokered convention, Bloomberg, you don't want to count Bloomberg out because you don't want to upset that much money that is a potential. Remember, Bloomberg himself said he bought congressional races for the Democrats last time. They upset him. Maybe he doesn't buy them another batch. This is the same reason why activists who were now all upset about Bloomberg while he's running for president left him alone while he was mayor, because they all knew that once he was out of office, they would want a piece of that pie, that piece of that money, that piece of that wealth that was over there. Now, I'm going to put this down for a second because I have to, I want to send out the link again for the Midnight Court. So hold on 1 second. So I might not be heard as well. Let's type it out. The Tech Guys. So, streaming. Oh, my keyboard's going a little slow tonight. Probably because I'm doing the live streaming. So, All right, so I ended up putting in a V at the end of live, but an extra, that's life. So all of these things happen. Biden wins these states. Elizabeth Warren finishes third in Massachusetts, and nobody expected third in Massachusetts. And it's very, very funny. It's funny to watch Elizabeth Warren fail this. But like I said, I expected Bloomberg to say, I thought that they would keep Warren in simply because Warren was taking votes away from Bernie Sanders, and the establishment doesn't want Bernie Sanders. But they apparently have decided that Elizabeth Warren is not necessary to beat Bernie Sanders, that Bernie Sanders was beatable. And I have an article up on the website. And the website, by the way, for those of you watching who do not know, is DaTechGuyblog.com, DaTechGuy blog.com. And you can check these things. You can check out the site. There's a piece on there. And the piece is titled, Joe Biden Saved by the Mrs. Tessie Democrats. And you can see the story in there. And I'm going to give you a brief rundown of the story. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. I want you to get a chance. But I know this woman. She was a friend of my mother's. My mother has been dead now about 8 years. She died a month after voting for Scott Brown in 2012. She lived long enough to vote in the 2012 election. In fact, I took her taking her out for the 2012 election. That was the last time she went out before she got sick, and she was dead within a month. This lady, about 10 years younger than my mother, maybe 15 years younger than my mother, had a daughter my age that I went to school with. Oh, beautiful girl. Beautiful girl. I still melt when I see her every now and then. Married a very nice guy, very fine fellow. He was a good man that she ended up with. But very devout Catholic woman, this woman. In fact, she's still, you can see me, I got the gray beard that's coming in and so forth. She still hands me a $5 bill every now and then, says, got some ice cream with your wife. That's the difference between us in age and so forth. And one day we were talking, this was during the 2016 election. And she was going, and suddenly she mentioned that she was hoping that Hillary Clinton would win. Now, she's a very devout Catholic. About Hillary Clinton. And I started to ask her why about this. And then it occurred to me, she wasn't a political person. She was my mother's friend. And when her daughter was born, John F. Kennedy was president. Very Catholic Democrat. Before her daughter was born, when she was first married, the biggest Democrat out of Massachusetts, besides Senator Kennedy, was John McCormick, who was the guy just below Sam Rabin. He ended up being speaker after Rabin. John McCormick, Massachusetts, very devout Catholic. When her second daughter was born, Bobby Kennedy was still alive and running for president. Catholic, 10 children. And it occurred to me at that time that when she thought of the Democrat Party, she thought of the Democrat Party of her youth, which was full of ethnic Catholics who were very devout. For a devout Catholic to be a Democrat in the 50s, 60s, and even part of the 70s was not an odd thing. Tip O'Neill, for example, Speaker of the House, very, very Catholic, very Democrat. My mother was a Democrat for a very long. She did not figure it out until 2010. And my mother's a very cagey person. But in Mrs. Tessie's mind, the Democrats were still those old Democrats. Well, something happened this time around with Joe Biden. And when you look at the exit polls, you'll see that the exit polls, Biden did very well with people over 65 and people 45 to 65, while Bernie Sanders did well with people much younger. The younger people, the 18s to 29s and 29 to 35s, Biden did terrible with, and Sanders did wonderful with. And Bloomberg did his best with the same people as Sanders. And I want you to think about this. I was born in 1963. I'm going to be 57 this year. If you were born when I was 1963, my father served in World War II. My grandparents were born in the 19th century, to give you an idea of why I think the way I do. You were taught, you lived during the Cold War. You knew what communism was. You knew what socialism was. And the schools taught it. The schools taught the evils of communism and socialism. So if you're 57 or older, you were taught this in school. If you're 47 or older, you were taught this in school. If you were 37 or older, you probably heard about it a bit. But if you were born in the last 25 years, not only did you never have to worry about communism, if you were born from 1990 on, if you're 30 years old or under, you never had to worry about communism. You never thought of it. So communism was never a threat to you. In fact, if you're 35, which is the top end of Bernie, not only did you never have to worry about communism, but by the time you started to get to schools, the investments that our Soviet friends had made in our school system and our Chinese friends had made in our school systems were paying off. And you were being taught that socialism is all right. It's capitalism. It's America that's horrible. Well, when the media finally, and remember, the media didn't give a care, and I talked about this on the first podcast, the media never cared about Bernie Sanders' communism and socialism. They didn't worry about it. That didn't bother them. You didn't see media people all bent out of shape because Bernie Sanders was a socialist who had honeymoons and they didn't care. They never cared. And they didn't care because they didn't want to lose those Bernie Sanders voters. That it wasn't worth it enough. But once they figured out, hey, this could cost us not just the election with Donald Trump, because I think the thing about Biden is if Biden loses to Trump, it doesn't hurt anybody in the system, so to speak. The younger candidates who wouldn't have had to go on head up against Trump and get ruined won't have to worry about it. Much safer to let Biden get creamed by him and so forth. But with Biden on the ticket, it's less likely to cost Democrats seats in various House districts, and they don't want to lose those House districts or those districts internal. You don't want to lose state House districts, which could make a difference. So suddenly the media over the last 10 days discovered Bernie Sanders socialism. And the Democrats who watch the media, the older Democrats who were still watching CNN or still reading the newspapers and so forth, and who still believe some of this stuff that they're being told, were suddenly, oh my God, this guy's a socialist. And they remembered what socialism was. And because of that, those older people said, we don't want this. This is bad. And those late deciders, and if you look at the polls, the late deciders went to Joe Biden. And those late deciders were older people. That type of Democrat saved Joe Biden. And it's almost as if, and it's funny, I keep thinking of a line from the Civil War. There was an incident in the Civil War called the Trent Affair, where a couple of Confederate emissaries were on an English flagged ship, the Trent, heading for London. And they were intercepted by the USS San Janico and imprisoned in Massachusetts, actually. And England almost went to war over it because you don't grab an English flagged ship and take people off of it. I mean, Palmerston was ready to go to war. They sent 10,000 troops to Canada. And Lincoln decided, one war at a time. And his Secretary of State Stewart sent the British a message saying, well, of course, it's right. This was we didn't authorize this. And you know what? This is the same type of thing that we complained to you about in 1812. So we have no business doing that. So we'll happily return the people. And basically, he hit the English for what they had done in the past on impressment and so forth, to make it more palatable to people. But when those two Confederates were released, and they got to England, there was a very big editorial in the London Times saying, these men just want to draw us into their own trouble. They should not get the idea that just because we almost went to war for them, that we're interested in their cause. And in a way, I think that's what it is with Joe Biden. A lot of people worked hard to keep Bernie from winning big on Super Tuesday. But don't get the idea that they're all in love with Joe Biden. They are afraid, and rightly so, of what socialism would mean. Now, I actually would prefer Bernie as the nominee for a couple of reasons. First of all, again, I think it's a bigger advantage for Trump, and I want every advantage I can get. But second of all, that younger generation that's been taught socialism, I'd rather have that confrontation now in 2020 while we have Trump up there than to have it in 2024, 2028 with a less charismatic Republicans. We don't know who's going to be up there. I'd rather nip this stuff in the bud now. But either way, Joe Biden has now got Joe-mentum, as people are calling it, and Hollywood stars are suddenly going over there. My friend Maxine Baptiste, Brown Sugar on, I forget the number, Brown Sugar on Twitter, who was a liberal who used to be on my radio show, DaTechGuy on the radio. She was, when I'd have the panel, she would be on there. She's delighted as a big Biden fan. Although she wanted Kamala Harris. We had a little discussion about the appeal of Kamala Harris, who did much worse than Elizabeth Warren. But people are jumping on the Biden bandwagon because they think that Bernie's done. Now, I don't think it's not done until it's actually done. I mean, remember, 10 days ago, Biden finished fifth. What was it? 2 weeks ago, Biden finished fifth in New Hampshire, and everyone was talking about how he was finished. Suddenly, we heard about Buttigieg. Suddenly, we had heard about Colbar's momentum. So we heard about everything but this. Biden had one good debate, and Bloomberg blew up. And speaking of Bloomberg, it's worth noting something that Molly Hemingway said. Remember, Mike Bloomberg spent $500 million. And you shouldn't think of it as wasting $500 million. Think of it more of a stimulus package for the economy, for political consultants and media people who are the subject of all those ads. Unfortunately, none of those ads were spent on my blog, which I'm very sad about because I wouldn't have minded taking some of his money, although I wouldn't have been too thrilled about running his ads. I might not have actually done it, but it would have been nice if he offered me a bunch of cash. Which reminds me, I want to thank old friend Pan Macchino, actually, I should pronounce that, who hit the tip jar. I was mentioning that we were about $180 short for this month. And what did she do? She hit the tip jar for the full amount. So we're on track. Thanks to Pam. Thank you very much. And if you like what you see here, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching this afterwards, because let's face it, most of the audience isn't up right now. DaTechGuyblog.com, DaTechGuy blog.com. Hit the tip jar. Any amount, more than welcome. We've been a little short lately. Like I said, we're about $180. I'd like to increase my donations about $180 more a month to cover bills. Hopefully that'll happen. This month we made it, thanks to Pam. And we're going to keep doing this podcast because I must admit, I miss the old radio show. I really do. I enjoyed the radio show. And once I can figure out how I can get calls in here, I still have the 800 number. I've still registered my old 800 number, 8889 Fedora. I still own the number. So maybe when I figure this out, when I have some time, because I literally come straight home from work. I work my shift, 3:30 to midnight shift. I get in the car. I head home as fast as I can. I got a 20-mile drive. Luckily, it's midnight, so there's not a lot of traffic. Get home. Go change up a little bit, not too much. I leave on the hat, leave on the scarf, because it's the tech. This is the tech guy on the radio, and get things set up to do the podcast. So it's literally straight from work. And I forgot how much I enjoyed it, but I do miss the callers, and maybe we can get that set up to do the callers again. I'm gonna have to tinker around here, figure out how to do that, or if there's a way of doing it. But I really enjoyed the radio show, and every now and then I guest host on WCRN, my old station. And of course, I should mention that you can catch me on the radio every Saturday on WQPH 89.3 FM. The show is called Your Prayer Intentions. And this week, I know I'm diverting from the subject of the podcast, but this week we have a guest. This is going to be part one of 4 parts, maybe 5 over the next 5 weeks, with a woman by the name of Kendra Von Esch. Her book is called Am I Catholic? I think I have a copy of it here. Do I have a copy of it here? I thought I did. I guess I don't have it handy. I was sure I had a copy. Hold on one second. I have a copy of that lying around. I would have swore there was a copy right here. No, I guess I don't have a copy hanging around. Oh, maybe I do. This is her book. Am I Catholic? Great book. You're going to want to buy it. You're going to want to listen to the interview. Here's the back cover. Kendra Von Esch is the name. You want to check that out. And since we're busy plugging books, let me plug Stacey McCain's old book. If you want to understand feminism, the book is called Sex Trouble. Essays on radical feminism and the war against human nature. Excellent book. Required reading, by the way. Required reading. And there's shelves of books all over the place here. This place is full of old books. I read books. That's how the net is nice, but old printed books are nicer. But anyways, back to the election. So now we're going to have Bernie and Biden head to head because there's only 3 candidates left. And the third candidate is Tulsi Gabbard, who did win a delegate. And this is where it gets interesting. No one's going to say that there's no room on the debate stage for Tulsi Gabbard now. Can't make that argument because now there's only 3 candidates. But the Democrats are almost certain they've done their best to ignore her. Ever since she took out Kamala Harris, and she took out Kamala Harris, she took out Kamala Harris the way that Elizabeth Warren took out Mike Bloomberg. It was nasty, and I mean, just beat her up with her record. And again, the problem with a lot of these people is they hadn't been vetted. The Democrats did not bother vetting these people because vetting them involves hitting them. And even the Sanders stuff, they're really worried, and they should be worried because if Sanders decides to go third party, or if his people decide to stay home, it's going to be trouble. But it's amazing to watch these stories. Listen to this headline at the New York Times. As Bernie Sanders pushed for closer ties, Soviet Union spotted opportunity. Previously unseen documents from the Soviet archive show how hard Mr. Sanders worked to find a sister city in Russia when he was mayor in the 80s. Moscow saw a chance for propaganda. Now, I submit and suggest if the Democrats were not so afraid of a Bernie Sanders at the top of their party, that story never runs in the New York Times. Never, ever, ever runs in the New York Times. Because it's been I got to say, Bernie Sanders is a magical guy. He's managed to turn the media and the Democrats against communism and socialism, at least for a little while. But as long as Bernie's a threat, those articles are going to keep up, and it's going to be so much fun to see them continue to hit that. Because I'll tell you, once they're sure that Biden's got the nomination, suddenly no one will be talking about Bernie and socialism anymore. Suddenly, at least not on the in the media. Suddenly, it'll be as if it never happened. And that's actually a bit of irony here, because a lot of people have been comparing Donald Trump's 2016 campaign to Bernie Sanders in 2020. And there's one significant difference. And I actually wrote this. This is my lead post for today that I just put up before the podcast went up. Donald Trump, people who didn't vote for Donald Trump were in the primaries. Like, I didn't vote for Donald Trump in the primaries. I voted for Ted Cruz. In fact, I don't think all of my wife and my sons are now all for Trump. But during the primaries, 3 of us voted for Cruz and 1 voted for Ben Carson. Well, the problem with Donald Trump at the time was we didn't know if he meant it. He was saying all the right things in terms of conservatism. Everything he said was spot on. But we didn't know if he meant it. He said the right things, but he didn't have a history of conservatism. Not like a Ted Cruz, for example. So we were unsure. Now, I was reassured by Father Frank Pavone. I never forget this. After Trump clinched the nomination, I waited about a week because I decided if I was going to endorse, I wanted to do it before the convention because then it would mean something. I didn't want to wait till the convention. And Father Frank Pavone assured people this man is going to be pro-life. And boy, did he turn out to be right. I mean, so that's when I finally endorsed Trump. But the point is, a lot of us weren't for Trump at first because we did not know if he meant what he said. Turned out he meant it in spades. We never expected the kind of results we got. But the funny thing is, Bernie Sanders' problem is exactly the opposite. The people who didn't vote for Bernie Sanders in the primaries weren't afraid that he didn't mean what he said. They were afraid he meant it. Because he does mean it. Bernie Sanders does like socialism. He does want all these socialist things. And he's been pushing this stuff for years. And people were afraid that he meant it. So the people who didn't vote for the people who were concerned about Trump were concerned that he didn't mean what he said. But the people concerned about Bernie in their party were concerned that he did, which is a real interesting thing. So Joe Biden, he is of the daily gaffe machine, the man who, when having the biggest political night of his life, couldn't tell his wife from his sister. Oh, brother. I mean, this is good. Trump is going to tear him apart. He's going to tear him to pieces. And we're going to hear a lot more about Hunter Biden and a lot more about other things. But Joe is likable. And one of the reasons why he's likable, one of the reasons why this stuff doesn't bother him is this stuff, all of these things about his family making a mint off of politics. That was the norm when he got into politics. It was all about making money for yourself. And I never forget I remember interviewing a politician from Alabama, and he was telling me a story from his youth when he first got into politics. An older politician put him aside and said, "Don't you get your mind that you were going to do all these great things. You're here. This is your business. This is your living. You're here to make a buck. And if you happen to get something nice done for the people, that's just a bonus. But you're here to make your living." Never forget that. And Biden, this is all about getting money and getting rich. How do you think Bernie Sanders became a millionaire? I bet you that campaign bought an awful lot of his books. I mean, crap, if I ran for president and I raised $50,000, I could buy a bunch of my book. I've got a book, Hail Mary, the Perfect Protestant Catholic Prayer. Oh, it reminds me, sometime this year, hopefully, I'll have my second book out. I'll be writing it with my wife, and it's called 30 Tips to Stay Married 30 Years. We've got up to 29, so we still got to get that last tip to go, and I want my wife to double check some things on it because she's better at these things. So keep an eye out for that for when it comes out. The book is going to be called 30 Tips to Stay Married 30 Years. We'll probably have to cross out that and put a 2 because it'll be 32 years this year. But these guys are there to make money. And that's one of the reasons why Trump drives so many of them crazy, because Trump put in people whose primary goal, the people he put in were not there to make a living out of this. The people he put in were there to solve problems. Trump solves problems. Now, if Biden is going to be, if he gets the nomination, and again, the beginning of the week, we weren't talking about Biden getting the nomination. This is all convention. Everything changes once votes actually happen. Biden got a lot of votes this time, but we don't know what's going to happen in a week. Biden could do something so stupid that Bernie Sanders will look better. That's why, while they're hitting Sanders, that I don't think they're going to try and destroy him, because they have to walk a fine line. Their goal is to keep Bernie Sanders in the fold without letting him win. And it's gonna be an interesting little thing to see how it's. But Biden is now looking strong. But if he wins, it's going to be 4 years of good stealing for all of his pals and buddies. It's going to be Buscema on the board. If you're a member of the Biden family, you're going to be set. And this is one of the advantages of Trump, in that when you're already rich, and this would have been an advantage with Bloomberg, if you're already that rich, I mean, people will probably stay at your hotels, buy your product because they think they're going to be able to influence you, but they're not going to be able to. They're just not, because you don't need their money. It doesn't matter. But it's not going to be boring. I got to say, this is not going to be boring as long as Bernie keeps there fighting. So I'm going to want to keep an eye on the next debate. Hopefully it'll happen on a day that I'm not working. I work Sunday through Thursday, so odds are I won't be able to see it live. I still want to see what happens with Tulsi Gabbard, because now people who don't want a socialist and don't want a Alzheimer's patient now have only one choice in the Democratic Party, and that's Tulsi Gabbard. So it will be very, very interesting to see what happens next. But right now, Biden is looking good, better than he was 4 days ago. The question is, will he look this good in a week? It'll be fun to find out. Now, I want to tease the next podcast because I originally was going to do this podcast on Doctor Who. Now, I'm wearing one of my Doctor Who scarves. This is my small one, the first one I ever had. And the franchise has been destroyed. And I'm going to give you a little sneak preview of this in the sense that basically socialism is destroying Doctor Who, or wokeism is destroying Doctor Who. And it's a great example of how socialism does it. Because the BBC gets its money from what's called a license fee. To give you an example of, in fact, we'll do this now. We'll give you an example of what socialism does. BBC gets its money for a license fee. If you own a TV set, you have to pay a license in England. And Boris Johnson is talking about taking away that license fee, and the BBC gets that money. And so they make a lot of stuff with it. So you've got a guaranteed source of revenue. So if they want to turn Doctor Who into this woke thing, and they lose the old customer base, they don't care. They can try and get a new customer base. And even if it becomes a niche market, maybe they were making a lot of money on the Doctor Who licensing and the products and so forth. And maybe that money is drying up, but it doesn't matter because they still get paid from the license fee. All that other stuff was gravy for the BBC. But what happens if the license fee goes? What if you run out of other people's money? That's going to be interesting. We're going to talk a lot more about that on the next podcast. But before we go, some housekeeping. Again, if you like what you saw here today, feel free to go and hit the tip jar that's at DaTechGuyblog.com. That's DaTechGuy blog.com. I write there every day. Once in a great while, I miss a day, but I write there every single day. We also have our Magnificent Seven writers from Juliet Baldylocks, who's there twice a week, at least until the limit imposed by California's AB5 kicks in. We have Chris Harper, a professor from Temple University and a former member of the mainstream media who writes for us on Tuesdays. We have Marathon Pundit, who writes on Sundays. The Navy bureaucrat, who writes on Saturdays. And so it goes in Shreveport. Pat Austin, who writes on Mondays. John Fournier, who writes on Thursdays. It's a great lineup of writers. Check them out. And again, if you like what you see, consider hitting the tip jar because my writers aren't free writers. I pay my writers. So if you think they're worthwhile, kick in and share the article. If you like the podcast, thumbs up it. Share it. Let people see it. Let people decide. But like I say, this podcast, it's a no frills podcast. Got the webcam from my USB mic, my webcam from my laptop, my second laptop with the email over there. I actually use a separate laptop for my email. I don't have the email on the same laptop. It's like my brother. My brother has a laptop that is devoted only to his taxes, and he doesn't keep that one on the internet, which is very Sicilian of him. Well, we're all Sicilian, so of course it's very Sicilian of him. But as I was saying, if you get a chance, check that out. Consider hitting the tip jar. Remember that the blog's there 7 days a week. Remember that my radio show on WQPH 89.3 FM is Your Prayer Intentions. We record it on Wednesdays. I recorded it. I usually record it around Wednesday around 12 o'clock. I used to do it Tuesdays, but give myself an extra day. If you have a prayer request for that show, you can email it to WQPH893@comcast.net. You can leave it at the WQPH prayer wall, which is at WQPHradio.org. Click on prayer wall, leave your prayer requests there. Or if you have a prayer request for the prayer request show, leave it as a comment on this podcast. And I'll see it and I'll make it a point to include it in our prayer requests next week. So we got the podcast. We got the Catholic radio show every Saturday. We got the podcast every Friday at 12:35 a.m., just after I get home from work. And every Monday, 12:35 a.m., just when I get home from work. So I start my work week and end my work week with the podcast, the blog. Again, you want to find me? I am around. You can find me on Twitter at the Tech Guy Blog. You can find my YouTube channel that you're listening to here, of course, the Tech Guy Blog channel. Check out what we do, and if you like it, let us know. If you don't like it, let us know too, because I can't improve unless I'm critiqued. So feel free to critique us. Say what you want, as long as you're not posting porn on my comments. I don't mind what you have to say. Well, I want to thank you for sharing this half hour with us. We will be here in, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, in 3 days. I'll be back before this laptop again, microphone, talking in my quiet, calm voice because everyone else in the house is asleep. Till then, this is Pete the Tech Guy saying goodbye, God bless, and thanks for giving me some of your time. We only have a limited amount on this earth, and I'm very flattered that you're willing to share some of yours with me. Have a great one.